Hello, my name is Meyana Thorne, and I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Maryland Global Campus. The title of my presentation is Educated, Dedicated, Burned Out, and Separated, a systematic review of managerial burnout mitigation strategies that are effective for millennials. There is a current crucial need to retain employees within the human service sector, and for clarity, human service organizations are broadly defined as those that aim to improve the lives of individuals through the use of knowledge, skills, and competencies in direct, often emotionally charged customer or client interactions. In order for these organizations to perform successfully, they must retain qualified, engaged employees, and they must also avoid the negatively cascading effects of turnover. However, research indicates that staff turnover has become a consistent concern and the cause of high economic costs within human service organizations. Millennials currently represent the largest generation in the workforce, yet they are also the generation that is most likely to succumb to burnout, according to Stewart, Liu, Gersoy, and others. Millennial burnout and turnover as a result of burnout has incurred multi-million-dollar costs to some human service organizations. As displayed in this image, unfortunately, the burnout to turnover pathway within human service organizations is often cyclical. Burnout causes attrition and turnover, and in organizations where turnover is frequent, the remaining staff are met with prolonged stress. They may continue to experience burnout, and this may progress until staff decide to leave. This therefore increases turnover by requiring organizations to refill empty positions. The purpose of this qualitative systematic review is to explore the strategies that will mitigate or reduce the phenomenon of burnout among millennial employees in order to make recommendations for managers. In order to discuss mitigation strategies for burnout, I began with a scoping literature review to obtain a thorough understanding of relevant scholarly articles. Regarding burnout, prominent scholars like Freudenberger and Maslach have thoroughly explored the phenomenon since the 1960s. They explain that burnout is both a psychosocial syndrome and a term to describe feelings or perceptions of emotional exhaustion and excessive demands. They also explain that burnout is caused by both personal and organizational factors. According to Hahn and others, burnout is prevalent in the human service sector, and in 2019, it was associated with approximately $4.6 billion in economic costs. Regarding millennials, currently, studies differ on the age ranges of this generational cohort, but it is generally understood that they are born between the late 70s or early 80s and the late 90s. In discussions of their characteristics, authors like Myers and Sadagiani and Burns have described millennials as lazy and entitled. However, emerging studies, including those written by Delgado, Easton, and Stein, recognize millennials for currently being the most educated and the most adaptable generation in the workplace. They also describe this cohort as possessing the knowledge and technical skills to better their workplaces. Literature continues to acknowledge some of their generationally associated workplace preferences and dislikes, as mentioned within this slide. In context with the management problem, it is understood that when millennials become burned out, they frequently resign or transfer away from their positions, therefore contributing to turnover in the workplace. And while burnout mitigation strategies already exist, there is a gap in determining which of those strategies are effective. Therefore, with the goal of this study being to assist managers by providing them with effective strategies to reduce millennial burnout resulting in the reduction of turnover, the research question guiding this study is, which management strategies are effective at mitigating burnout for millennial employees within service-oriented industries? This study will be conducted through the lens of Hopful's conservation of resources theory due to its usefulness for maintaining the context of the management problem. The conservation of resources theory, or CORE for short, was designed with human service workers in mind, and it maintains the idea that people need to acquire and conserve resources in order to reduce stress. When resources are lost, people may induce stress or work towards acquiring new resources. CORE also explains that resources are often perceived on a personal level as beneficial, and they include fundamental needs such as food and water, social needs such as communication and support, or other items that can aid in the acquisition of new resources, such as money or tools. As such, this graphic was created to depict the process of CORE, and I've personally selected colors that correspond with the well-known Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a theory that I've found to have a degree of similarity. I've selected these colors and designed this graphic to show that as needs or resources are acquired, people can mentally progress towards spaces of pleasure and success. To apply the core theory directly with the concepts of the management problem, this conceptual framework was created. It depicts the managers as the context, as that is the population for which this dissertation aims to serve. It also acknowledges that burnout is often based on perception. Therefore, this process takes place in a thought bubble. Lastly, it shows the assumption that if managers are aware of pre-existing burnout strategies and the millennial workplace preferences or resources, and also, if managers are able to implement positive resource-based strategies that align with these things, they may effectively reduce millennial burnout. With this information, it was time to move forward with the completion of the systematic review. A systematic review is a reputable method of allowing researchers to research a topic, build upon the pre-existing bodies of knowledge, identify gaps in literature, and provide a rationale for answering their intended research question. And systematic reviews are achieved through the process of the researcher conducting rigorous, explicit, and transparent research. To conduct this systematic review, a 7-step methodology derived from prominent scholars Hardin and Thomas, as well as Pettigrew and Roberts, was followed. The methodology involves crafting a clearly defined research question, developing a search strategy, conducting the search process, screening the results, critically appraising the studies, analyzing and synthesizing the studies and findings, and ultimately revealing the findings. Although it is not listed here, scholars like Go and others state that systematic reviews should also incorporate the feedback of subject matter experts to capture their expertise as feedback. As such, subject matter expert feedback is also included in this process. With the research question clearly defined, the search strategy was conducted as the first step, and the search string was crafted with guidance from the University of Maryland Global Campus librarian Cynthia Thomas. The search was conducted through 3 databases, UMGC OneSearch, ABI Inform, and Scopus. This was done because UMGC OneSearch is a single tool containing over 40 research databases, and ABI Inform and Scopus contain databases specifically focusing on business and economics and curated abstracts, respectively. As indicated in this prisma, which is a diagram reflecting the manipulation process and inclusion of studies for the sake of transparency, the initial searches resulted in the retrieval of over 8,000 results. Therefore, inclusion and exclusion criteria were introduced into the process in order to ensure that only the most directly relevant existing research was used to answer my research question. Articles were excluded if they were not full text, published after 2004, because that's when millennials entered the workplace, written in English, peer-reviewed, or published in academic journals. This reduced the total potentially usable articles to about 1,600. A thorough screening of titles and abstracts led to the exclusion of an additional 1,500 articles, which solely focused on items such as the pandemic, scientific principles of burnout, factors of burnout, student experiences, self-care practices, and articles that blatantly excluded millennial participants from their findings. This resulted in 80 articles being appraised through the MMAT and ultimately 53 articles being included for analysis. The table here depicts some of the observed characteristics of the studies that were ultimately included after the completion of the MMAT. And for clarity, MMAT stands for Mixed Method Appraisal Tool, and it is a critical appraisal tool that is used to assess the quality and appropriateness of studies. After the completion of the MMAT for this systematic review, 27 articles were excluded, resulting in the 53 articles being used. These include 10 qualitative studies, 37 quantitative studies, 3 mixed method studies, 1 randomized control trial, and 2 non-randomized studies. The analysis of the studies begin with the coding process. In terms of written literature, Saldana's coding process refers to the methodology in which the researcher identifies words or phrases that illustrate ideas or convey messages. Inherently, this process is subjective and may differ based on the interpretation and purposes of the researcher. In an effort to eliminate subjectivity and bias, the first cycle of coding for this study is completed a priori to identify sentences that are associated with the research question and core theoretical lens. The second cycle is completed inductively, in which sentences are not sought, but rather they are observed and noted based on the original author's intentions. For example, a sentence maintaining a finding that was observed specifically in the airline industry was coded as airline, quote unquote, and grouped with other codes to form the applicable industries category. As other codes were identified and categories were formed, they created the effective strategies theme as observed in the table here. Additionally, Atlas TI was a tool that was used to maintain the organization of this process. To date, 24 articles have been coded, resulting in 406 quotations, 93 codes, 9 categories, and 2 preliminary findings. Again, because this review is not yet completed, the findings thus far are preliminary and subject to influence by the remaining studies. Currently, the literature is providing clarity of the prevalent effective resource-based strategies, which include creating balanced work schedules. So far, this has been found in 11 of the studies I've read. The literature also includes empowering employees through training and supervisor support, and that has been found in 10 studies. Other findings are present, and the literature also suggests that these strategies are not necessarily exclusive to millennials. This finding, if consistent with the remaining literature, could prove to be very valuable to managers, as there are multiple generations represented in the workforce. The next steps of the systematic review involve completing the coding process, analyzing and synthesizing the findings, confirming a conceptual framework, presenting the findings, as well as the implications for management, areas for future research, and the limitations. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to interacting with you and responding to your questions.